It's Fully Threaded Radio, Unthreaded.
Hi, everyone. Eric Dudas with you. It's another Unthreaded edition of the Fully Threaded Radio podcast. This time, it's a conversation with Fastener Technology International news editor and longtime Fully Threaded contributor, Mike McNulty. The Fastener News Report has been a big part of the podcast since almost the very beginning. And a lot of people will find it quite interesting to hear Mike's unexpected route as the journalistic voice of the fastener industry. Not something that he set out to do, but I think we all agree he does a really great job of it. Brian and I have been so fortunate to have his partnership over the years, so I really enjoyed putting this one together. The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio, Star Stainless, and the Linfast Solutions Group family of companies, and Brighton Best International. Fully Threaded Radio is also sponsored by Buckeye Fasteners, BTM Manufacturing, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, Fastener Technology International, Global Fasteners, InSequel Software, J. Franco, Cressa, MW Components, Solution Industries, 3Q Inc., Volt Industrial Plastics, and Worth Industry USA. Mike starts out his Fastener News Reports with a preview of what he's going to talk about, and then he says he's still focused on fasteners, no matter the hair-raising list of distractions that he just lists off. So it's going to be good to focus on Mike McNulty and his story right now. Sure appreciate you listening in, everyone, and hope you enjoy this conversation with Mike McNulty. Well, here's a change of pace. Mike, thanks for being here. What took us so long to do this?
I don't know. Maybe I was afraid of it or thought of it as another assignment that needed a lot of prep and I didn't want to do it.
Oh, maybe in the old days, not anymore. Looking at your bio, I could see you've got we're right around the corner from 30 years in the fastener industry. That's through Fastener Technology International. And of course, you got a long way looking over your shoulder with Fully Threaded Radio, too. That's an amazing story. I'm so glad we're taking this time for you to share a lot of it with our audience because we don't do enough of just spotlighting you.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and it's been a good time. I look back at, we started doing this in 2010, so it's been a lot of episodes. I think it was episode number 13. Now we're well into the 200, so I would have never guessed we'd be doing it this long.
That's probably true because you're a dogged researcher. I actually looked for the first time your name ever appeared on the show description, and it was episode 10, August 2010, which was right after we started because we launched in March of that year.
You're right. Yeah, you and Brian had me on, and we were having a discussion, and I think I was a little nervous and hyperventilating.
That's okay. The audio quality in those days was so bad that you wouldn't have been able to hear it anyway over all the background, the buzz.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Well, the first time we ever used the term Fastener News Report on the podcast was episode 15, which happened shortly after. That was November of 2010.
All right.
A little bit of history there.
Yeah, and I recall the first time I did the first few Fastener News Reports. They were wordy and they were fast and they were, again, the hyperventilation. I think Brian used to say the content was good, but the delivery is not. And it got better with you guys coaching me over the years. But I can remember, like I was trying to speak as if I was writing. It was like it was just too much information, and then I'd try to go fast, and then you'd like just slow down and do the headlines.
Well, we've all had a journey on this thing, learning as we go.
Absolutely.
It's been a lot of fun to develop it with you. And in those early days, you were still trying to figure out what the format should be. And you've, of course, locked in your groove a long time ago. I don't even like listening to the episodes like before episode 100 myself. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Right. But it was, like you said, it's a journey. So you got to start somewhere.
Right. I'm not sure, and I didn't look for this when we actually started making the Fastener Distributor Index a regular feature. But now, of course, you're old school at that. And when I look back over the years at all the big names that you've had on with you, it's really incredible. And you've developed that part of your skill as well. You're a really tremendous interviewer these days. I love what you've done with it. Sometimes, like I joke around, it should be the Mike McNulty show.
Yeah, but and I appreciate that comment, but the credit to the Fastener Distributor Index or FTI, that goes to you guys and you in particular. And, you set up the interviews and I just have to ask the questions and let them share their insights, which are good. So it's really, it's really a product that you guys put together. And I just happen to be it fit inside the news report and I get to ask the questions and hear what the contributors have to say, which is always good insights.
Well, again, it's a team effort, and the great thing is that the industry really seems to appreciate it, and you have a lot of listeners that just dig in right for that. But looking back on this list, some of the greats, some of the big names, Tim Roberto Jr., we used to have Mark Strandquist on occasionally. Yep. Michael Knight, who was with Endries for a long time, he was a super heavyweight. Jun Zhu, another big one. Mike Wren in the old days. I mean, wow.
A lot of good names there for sure. Industry leaders.
You got any favorites or any that stand out?
Oh, any favorites? Well, I mean, they're all good, and everybody's got something good. I guess I guess Tim O'Keefe always is a good thing. I think we have maybe we're similar age or something. So those have been good. I mean, they've all been good. Jun Zhu's very. He always talks about his different buckets and different things and prognosticating. Guy who helped set it up from Fastenal, Holden Lewis. Holden was always, just takes the stage and keeps going. Most of the guys, and there's been a few women too, but it's predominantly male. I don't, that's just the way it worked out. But most of the people doing it, they really run with it. And like I don't have to do much other than prompt them to move to the next section.
Well, it's come a long way, and I agree with you. Tim O'Keefe is always a giant in that area. And another big one who puts a lot of careful thought and consideration into it is GQ. So Bob Baer.
Yeah, he does a lot of study in that. And then I'm also thinking, as you're saying it, I appreciate the different accents that people have. The different, Tim Roberto has the New Jersey East Coast thing, even though he lives on the West Coast. And then you get, Tim O'Keefe's got the Midwestern twang or whatever. So I appreciate the different geographical perspectives people bring.
You go out of your way to understand each person's unique perspective and their background and stuff like that. And at the end of the segment, you pull out a little bit of that and you ask them what's going on in their world, with their company, what they're involved in and so forth. And a lot of these guys are also double dipping because they're doing work for different associations and things like that. So are there any things that have caught you off guard over the years? Because some of these things have run like 45 minutes uncut. I mean, they've really gone in interesting directions.
I wouldn't say off guard, but I think, all these people that we've interviewed, they all have a good story, and a good career background. And I like to tap into, the listeners know this and this, I like to tie into the sports connections. And some of them have been, good athletes or good, not just good business people, but they've done things outside of work or before their work that is kind of interesting. So I wouldn't say off guard, but just very, interesting backgrounds and common success, not, outside of work as well as inside of work.
A lot of things outside of work. Tim Iron Butt O'Keefe, we called him after your one interview, I remember.
The motorcycle ride and sliding across the highway on some kind of insects or something.
That was a great, predominantly fastener-related story. Oh, brother. All right, so you're mainly focused on fasteners, though. Let's say that. And we haven't used your catchphrase yet in this conversation, so let's put it out there. And speaking of interesting career paths, you had one yourself. So we said you're going on 30 years, and we're going to say that's through Fastener Technology International mostly, but you're involved with some of the other titles over there, and you can expound on that a little bit. But you had never planned on getting into the journalism side of things.
No, I mean, getting into journalism and in the fastener industry were not things that I expected to ever happen. And like you said, coming into the fastener industry starting in 1996 was, I like to think that I came in the side door of the fastener industry. So if you live in areas where, a lot of houses were built with detached garages, you had the front door, side door, and a back door, and nobody really used the back door. But you can only use the side door if you knew the family. That was at least what my dad told me. If you didn't know the family, you had to go to the front door. If you knew them, you could go to the side door. And I entered the fastener industry, I like to think, through the side door because I had gotten hired to be the editor of a magazine it's now called Wire and Cable Technology. And I had spent about 10 or 11 years in the wire and cable industry, which I had a colleague who said once that the wire and cable industry was and is my first love. And that's probably true. But I also, I love the fastener industry. But I had spent 10 years working in the wire and cable industry, working as a manufacturing engineer. And then I sold capital equipment and did marketing and product development for capital equipment in the wire and cable industry. And I wrote technical articles along the way. And was being offered the job to be the editor of this magazine called Wire and Cable Technology. And then, so we came to agree, and they're like, okay, and by the way, we also have this other magazine called Fastener Technology. And like, what do you know about fasteners? And I'm like, well, I've been to the hardware store to buy fasteners, and I've used fasteners, but that's about all I know. And they're like, well, you'd be surprised to learn that fasteners are made predominantly from wire. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought they were all machined, and I didn't really know anything about the fastener industry. So that's how I got involved in the fastener industry. And then to learn about the fastener industry, like the owners of the magazine, they introduced me to people at the Industrial Fastener Institute, Charlie Wilson, Frank Axtons, Joe Greenslade, Rob Harris, other guys like that. And they're like, okay, they're going to help you, teach you about the fastener industry. And they got me to go into factories around Ohio. I can remember going, I think, Lake Erie Screw and some other fastener places, which if I had to find them today, I wouldn't know where they are. I just went there, and that was before GPS. So we just used handwritten directions to go there. And I went into these factories and learned how to make fasteners from the cold forming and warm forming and hot forming, thread rolling, plating, packaging, secondary operations, all those things. So that's how I got involved in the fastener industry. And, and then of course, going to trade shows and things like that, you learn it, and going to different suppliers. So a lot of people with, like I mentioned, the side door is a very welcoming industry in that. But, going back, my background was engineering, manufacturing, and sales and marketing and product development. So, you asked about, the journalism background. I did not study journalism. And in fact, I was not very good in English when I was in high school, or even anything that had to do with storytelling, like history and things like that. My favorite things in high school were the things that I was good at. I was good at math and science, and I liked industrial arts. I just kind of spilled over in that, but didn't do any background in writing. In fact, I was kind of poor. My grades in English were like B's and C's. And a funny story was that when I got into college and I was studying engineering, we had to take electives, and I took English class, and it might have been English for non-English majors or writing for non-English majors. And our first assignment was to write a cover letter and a resume. And this was back before computers, and we had to do it on I had a manual typewriter with onion skin paper.
That's going back, huh?
And whiteout. And so I spent a lot of time doing this, a lot of corrections back and forth. It took me a long time. I got it in, I turned it in. And, the next day or the next class, waiting for the papers to come back, and everybody's getting their grades with notes and feedback and a letter grade. And I get mine back, and it just says, see me on the top of on the top of the paper. There's no grade. And I'm like thinking, oh boy, I was thinking I was probably going to get a B on this or something, but it says, see me. So I go see the professor, and I don't remember her name, but she was, was very kind, and she was, good at teaching this class. And she just said, this is not good. It's not good at all. And you shouldn't have even handed it in. And I was like kind of shocked. And I said, and she said, what's your major? And I said, I'm majoring in mechanical engineering. And she said, well, you can be the best mechanical engineer in the world, but if you can't communicate, you can't write, you're not going to go anywhere.
Wow. Well, that woman changed your life, man.
She changed my life. She said, you'll get hired because you're an engineering major, and those are high in demand jobs, but you won't really go anywhere. So it was kind of a shock. And I'm like, okay, I really got to buckle down. I've got to pay attention. I got to put some work into this. And I did well in the class, and I really worked hard at it. And then I took several more English electives while I was in college at Ohio State. And it took me 5 years to finish my degree. So I had a lot of time for electives, and I took some literature, and I took some other writing classes, and I took some speech classes. So I got good at communicating, which was kind of a precursor into getting involved into journalism. So then when I got into the wire and cable industry, and I was working in engineering, and then I was working in sales and selling capital equipment. I wrote technical articles and presented them at conferences, at different wire and cable trade shows and conferences that were published in this magazine, Wire and Cable Technology, and some other competitive magazines. So that's where I've got the background. So when I was being asked to, if I wanted to work for the magazine, I'm like, well, I don't know anything about journalism. And they're like, well, that's okay. You understand the industry and we'll teach you the journalism. And they did. I had some colleagues who were editors, lifetime editors at magazines and publishing people. And they taught me how to do the journalism part. And then I just, I had a love for manufacturing, wire and cable. And then I got that turned into love for fastener making and going into factories and talking to people and make these things. So I have the engineering and manufacturing background. And now, because of this woman in college, I learned how to communicate writing wise as well as speaking wise. And
here you are.
Here I am. Who would have ever thought I'd be, doing it? I can remember being in college, waiting to the last minute to write a paper the night before, and the same thing in high school. And a funny story in high school, when I had to do book reports, I didn't like to read, so I didn't even read the books. I would kind of skim the first chapter and the last chapter, and then I'd ask people in study hall to tell me what happened in the book, and then I'd write the book report. So that made me first learn the interviewing skills.
Tricks that we used to use before the era of AI, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's to your great credit that you extended yourself and pushed yourself, and you were obviously driven, and good for you. So my next question is going to be your inspiration for what you've written, because I remember when we first connected, actually, this might be a good direction to go down for a minute. It was... Well, you have a different memory than I do. I recall reading Fastener Technology International and reading your editorial at the front of the magazine. And it struck me because it was what I now these days call predominantly fastener related, meaning you were doing some political commentary, in this technical magazine or in this industry magazine. And I really liked that because we kind of shared the same perspective on that particular piece. And I reached out to you. And then I remember meeting you in person at a trade show, which probably was Columbus.
Yeah. We met in Columbus, and it was the world famous Columbus Fastener Show, which, I think it was called the National Industrial Fastener Show, but everybody referred to it as the Columbus Show, and it was it was the biggest and the best show in the industry, which eventually went away. It was displaced by the Las Vegas show, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, we met at the show. We were exhibiting there, and you came by, and I know you had just launched your business, the FCH Sourcing Network, and you came by and you said, and I don't know what you called it. Did you call it a portal, or did you call it, was it a B2B website, or,
We still don't know what to call it, Mike.
But it was a way for people to buy and sell fasteners on the internet, and with computers. And you said you were putting this thing together, and you needed to draw people to your site. And you said I remember you came over and you were focused and and serious, and also had a very strong handshake. And you said you needed to have something on the website to draw people in, and you called it eye candy. You needed eye candy for the website, and you wanted to know if Fastener Technology International would provide some news content or some article content for the website. So I always thought that was kind of funny because fasteners and eye candy don't always go together. And but and then that eventually you guys rolled that into the Fully Threaded Radio Network, and here we are, many years later. And
the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history. So yeah, we were like, okay, I don't know, we can give you some headlines, or we can give some stories to post on there. I don't know, And back then, people were talking about blogs and things like that. Maybe we could blog and everything. But you've tied the FCA Sourcing Network together with predominantly fastener-related podcasts. It's a platform to talk about your product, and then also to talk about the industry. And congratulations to you guys. It really worked out. And thanks for inviting me along.
Well, we've had a good run. Let's keep it going. Well, the terminology in all these things has changed a lot over the years. You brought up, did we call it a portal? I mean, that's now sort of an ugly word you want to avoid. Same with marketplace. We never really wanted to try to present ourselves that way.
The marketplace.
Yeah. And
getting rid of the brick and mortar stores, right?
Yeah, it's ongoing. Okay. Well, getting back to your opining on your editorial. You used to really get out into some choppy waters. I guess you still do. You mix it up pretty well these days with a little more tame content. But did you ever get any blowback from anyone? Did they ever say, what are you doing? This is a Fastener magazine. Why are you talking about politics?
Yeah, I would get that. And, the whole thing with the editorial page, the background for that, editorial page is supposed to be opinions. And one of my colleagues, like I said, these guys were teaching me how to do journalism. His name was Jim Keebler, and he worked his entire career as a journalist. He worked in different magazines that are called, for general manufacturing. He was kind of a legend in the publishing industry. And he said the editorial page is kind of like salt for the soup. The magazine is a soup, but you got to spice it up a little bit with the salt, or not spice, flavor it with the salt. So it's okay to talk about non-Fastener things. You got a magazine that's maybe 140 pages, 160 pages. And if you got one page that's opinion and it goes off of the Fastener industry or the general industry that's being covered by the thing, that's okay, as long as, as people know it's an opinion page. And at that time I had been reading, we're going to back up a little bit. My previous job when I was in the wire and cable industry, I had got hired by this company to do their marketing and product development for their capital equipment for the cable industry and for fiber optics and communication cables. And my boss at the time, he was like, what do you read? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do I read? I read some novels. He's like, you need to read business stuff. He's like, so you need to read the Wall Street Journal and you need to read Forbes magazine. And I'm like, oh, those are too expensive. Why? He goes, why don't you read them? I go, they're too expensive. I can't afford it. And he's like, I'll pay for your subscriptions. So he got me a subscription to the Wall Street Journal and to Forbes magazine. And he, by the way, he lived in the same neighborhood as Steve Forbes. So he was, this was in northern New Jersey.
Wow.
He knew Steve Forbes. So I started reading these publications. And so maybe that's probably, influenced my conservative bent a little bit, as well as some other things, just upbringing and things like that and common sense. But I like to read, and the Wall Street Journal would have every day like 2 or 3 subjects that they would cover in their editorial page.
Right.
I read that. That was my favorite thing to read, was their editorial page.
Were those the Paul Gigot years?
I don't remember. This would have been in the 1990s.
Yeah, I think he was running it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but it was good. And then Steve Forbes, a lot of editorials, they would, in magazine, it'd just be one subject. And Steve Forbes was the editor of Forbes magazine, and he would cover 2, 3, 4 subjects. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna follow his style. I'm not gonna just write about one thing for the whole page. Sometimes that happens, but I wanted to do 2 or 3 things. And he would always end things with different restaurants that he and his brothers went to, or different sporting events they went to, or things like that. So they got outside of the business subjects too. So those are the 2 places I learned to write editorials.
Well, I really like the metaphor, of the salt, and the magazine itself is the soup, and you're just adding the spice and all that. But you do want to be careful, not to add, say, like jalapeno peppers if it's a French restaurant.
Right.
So my question would be, did you ever really piss off a sponsor or anything? I mean, did you ever lose any business?
Yeah, one time we did, because I was talking about one time. What were we talking about? It was something having to do with a trade show, and that didn't go well. And it was on the manufacturing side, and I was criticizing the show and the sponsor, and some of the guys they got mad, and some of the exhibitors got mad, and they were complained to our publisher. But it was it was true. They did a lousy job promoting the show. This was a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, and I criticized the show because it was bad. And that was the only blowback from, like people that were buying ads in the magazine and everything. But then I talked to them and I'm like, well, tell me where I'm wrong. And they couldn't. They were just thinking that it should be like the Homer, if you got a hometown newspaper and never criticizes the politics or the hometown, it's kind
of. They just wanted you to smooth it over.
Yeah. So they were mad, but then I would occasionally get people complain saying, this is a Fastener magazine. Why are you talking about politics in Washington? Why are you talking about deficit spending? Why are you talking about socialism, this and that? And I would write back and say, the magazine is 140, 160 pages long, and there's one page in the magazine that is my opinions, and it's clearly identified as that. If you don't like it, you can rip that page out and look at the rest of the magazine, which is 99 point some percent focused on fasteners. And that this was, something to give some opinion about what's going on in the industry, also what's going on in the world, and politics and things like that do affect industry and things, So I think I've done a good mix, like you said. Sometimes things were a little bit more aggressive than other times, and then other times it's kind of mild. But when people, in my opinion, when they go to look at an editorial page, they want to have you take a stand. Whether they agree with it or not is one thing, but you should take a stand and then try to provide evidence to support your opinion.
Well, I'd agree with you entirely on that. The problem that a lot of people have with that is it requires an ingredient that is sadly missing in a lot of places these days, and that's called courage. And, with the pussified world that we live in a lot of ways, as a matter of fact, that first email that I sent you, I think I even pointed that out to you because that was something that impressed me about you very early on. So you got it.
I get more good feedback than bad. The bad, there's hardly any. My old boss, original boss, he said, most of the people agree, they have the similar agreement. It's fine. Keep doing, and do what you want. I don't know. The only time he didn't like it when I irritated one trade association who put on a bad trade show. And it was some people at the IFI, long time ago.
On the subject of trade shows, I want to ask you just quickly about the relationship that Fastener Technology had with the Fastener Tech Show, which ran for several years. I think it was an every other year show, but it was like a full-blown 10 by 10 booth style show that happened in Rosemont, and it was connected with the MWFA. How did that all work? Was it a partnership, or do you remember?
It was a partnership. Yeah, it was a partnership with the Midwest Fastener Association. And the show that preceded Fastener Tech, it was a show, I can't remember the exact name, it was the Industrial Fastener and Forming International show.
What year was this? Do you recall?
The first one was in 2007, and then it went all the way to 2019 was the last one. And it was, like you said, you're right, it was every other year. And before that, there was a show put on by the IFI, and it was the Industrial Fastener and Forming International Expo or something like that. And it was the acronym IFFI, and I used to jokingly call it IFFI. But it was a pretty, it was a show put on by the Industrial Fastener Institute, and this is not the one that I was criticizing. This was a pretty good show, and it was aimed at fastener manufacturers would go to the show, and the exhibitors would be machinery and tooling people, and accessories and materials like wire that would be fed into machines for making fasteners. And it was a pretty good show, and it ran in Rosemont every other year. And then the IFA, it was getting hard to produce, and the attendance, it was getting tough to draw. And it also had seminars that we helped produce, and we were a partner of that show. We didn't own it, but we supported it, and we provided content, the educational content. And then around, I guess, 2005 or so, the IFI wanted to get out of the show business, all the legal stuff, and they wanted to separate it from their association business. It was taking too much time. And they went to the MWFA, and they went to us, Fastener Technology International, and said, why don't you guys take it over? And so we did, as a partnership with the Fastener Technology International and the MWFA, and produced, starting in 2007 through 2019, produced a show every other year. It was in Rosemont, and it was, let me back up. The IFFI show also was, I think it was held in Cleveland and Rosemont. It rotated every other time. But the Fastener Tech show was done well, and it was a good experience. But then when the Fastener Fair USA came on the scene, which was produced by a professional show company rather than association.
Right, that was Mack Brooks. Kind of diluted the market.
Yeah, they started out with, it was Fastener Fair Stuttgart, which became Fastener Fair Global. Then they did Fastener Fair France, Fastener Fair India,
there's a
Mexico,
pile of them.
all over. And then they said, well, we're coming in. They brought the big guns, and they put it on like 2 weeks before Fastener Tech. And so it kind of, it diluted it, and they had a whole staff of people to work year round on the show. So it kind of knocked it out. But what it led to, the good fruit, was that it led to the MWFA, what do they call it? Fastener Week? The show without vowels. That's what you call it.
That's correct.
FSNTNR Week, the whole week, where they scale it back, and they do it in a hotel, it's tabletops, and they put some social events. They do the the golf, and they do the mixer, and now you guys do the running race ahead of time, and the charity work and stuff like that. So I think, sometimes when something breaks down or whatever, something good comes out of it. And I think that's what happened.
Well, these shows have a life cycle.
They have a lifetime. Yeah. And like I said, we did 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we did 6 of them.
I met a lot of people in the industry at that first one that I attended, and it was a very good show. But you're right, the MWFA has got that premier tabletop event now in the Midwest for sure.
Yeah, it's easier to produce. You don't have to have a big exhibit hall on it, so it works out good. And they do it, and do it every year. So, but it was a good experience for us. I enjoyed doing it, and like you said, things come and go. The Columbus show came and went, and the Las Vegas show is now in Phoenix, and who knows what'll happen down the road.
Well, we'll cover it on the next Fully Threaded. How about that?
Right.
I wanted to ask you, in addition to you being a little atypical for an engineer in a lot of ways, being so articulate and getting ideas from all sorts of places, outside of your focus, you got a really good dry sense of humor too. What kind of comedy movies do you like?
Oh, well, I like the first one that comes to mind. I like Adam Sandler. I like his movies, and the old ones when I was in college, and maybe embarrassed to admit which ones I like, but Fast Times at Ridgemont High and
classic,
and all those movies. I guess it was John Hughes produced a lot of those funny movies. Going back to the Blues Brothers and some of the Saturday Night Live guys from what's his name, Chris Farley was a funny guy. And I probably get some of the dry sense of humor too from my Irish background. I have my dad's parents are immigrants from Ireland, and a big family, 9 children altogether, and all the McNulty men, and my grandmother McNulty and grandfather McNulty, all had that dry Irish wit. So I think I learned it from them.
Yeah, I could see that.
The deadpan zingers. Or whatever.
How about Python? Did you ever get into them?
No, I didn't. I don't think my dad let me watch those for some reason. Growing up, there's a lot of things we weren't allowed to watch on TV.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I got to college age, that I did stuff.
Well, you've seen Search for the Holy Grail, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, dude, we got to get together one night. I wish I was you. It's one of the most brilliant comedies ever made, in my opinion. I mean, top 10 for sure. Top 10 ever made. So, yeah, you have that in store for you. I saw it the first time at the theater when I was in 3rd grade, and I've seen it many times since. And since, those are your cousins, it's required for you.
Yeah, I should probably check it out. And there was another guy from England that I wasn't allowed to watch. But I was allowed to watch the Three Stooges and the Little Rascals, which wouldn't pass any political correctness test today. But
yeah, those are off limits for an entirely different set of reasons these days, right?
Yep.
Well, okay. So speaking of Europe and overseas travel and everything, you've always struck me as kind of a Ohio guy mostly. And, talking about the fastener industry and all the opportunities that it affords people, it's allowed you, I guess, in a lot of ways to spread your wings and travel widely, because you've been to Asia many times. You've been to Europe many times with the fastener industry, and really to see the world. I mean, it's been a really great thing for you.
Yeah, I really enjoy travel. I like as you pointed out in the beginning, I'm an Ohio guy, and I was born and raised in Ohio and lived here in Ohio until I was about 26 or so. And before I got in the fastener industry, and then I got a job on the East Coast in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, and then I got another job in the New York metropolitan area. And I used to think I was kind of an Ohio guy. To me, a big city was Cleveland, and I went to school in Columbus, and back then, Columbus was not metropolitan. We thought of it as a farming town. But then going out the East Coast, I was surprised at how much I liked it. And I liked the big cities. I like, a lot of people don't like to go. There's a lot of things wrong in big cities, but there's a lot of good and beautiful stuff in big cities. You can find something good everywhere. And, my wife and I, when we were first married, we lived in, like I said, in the Philadelphia area and then in New York City. And we enjoyed that whole East Coast travel, New York City and Boston and Baltimore and Washington, which would light up the crime stories. But I got very comfortable in all these cities and using public transportation in them. And that's something I like to, you just got a real good feel for the city when you did things that the normal people do there, even though a lot of people might think of them as dangerous. And then that continued on in travels in Europe and predominantly in Germany and Italy and using the public transportation there. And same thing in Asia, and I also traveled in Mexico when I was working in the wire and cable industry, selling machinery down there. And again, just beautiful experiences everywhere you went. So I was surprised that wherever you went, there were some common denominators. There's always common dangers too in travel and that. But I always like doing things in different places, and even used like my travels to China. I would ride the subway and the public transportation in China. And that was one place that kind of surprised me. It was just the massive number of people, number one. And then it was probably, of all the places I went, it was probably the place that had the least amount of friendliness, I guess, or that it was harder to find the good stuff there in China than in the other places. So that was a little bit surprising. But I've really enjoyed it. This Ohio guy got out and traveled around. Like when I was in college, I had a bunch of interviews in college, and back then people would come onto campus and interview, and I was predominantly sticking towards the Ohio things, but I did interview some places outside of Ohio. And when it came down to it, I had senior year before I graduated, I had like 25 interviews, and I lived with 7 other guys, and we all had a lot of interviews. People would come on campus, and you had criteria to interview with the places. And those 25 interviews that I had before Christmas of my last year in school, I got 20 rejection letters, and my roommates got a lot of rejection letters too, and we hung them on the wall of our house. And we one guy made a stamp that said rejected, and we had red ink, and we put it on the wall. But I got 5 callbacks, and of those 5, 2 of them were regressive. One was a division of General Motors making wire and cable in Ohio, and the other was Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis. So I took a plane ride. It was only the second plane ride of my life out to St. Louis from Columbus, Ohio, and interviewed with Anheuser-Busch. And it was a great job. It was the better of the 2 jobs that I got offered before Christmas. But, one was in Ohio and one was in St. Louis. And at that time, as a 22-year-old Ohio guy, I couldn't leave the state. I wanted to stay close to home, and I took the job in Ohio, which is the factory that made automotive wire and cable for all GM cars at the time. And but I was afraid to go to St. Louis. And but I met my wife at that job, and so that was good. And then I took other jobs, went to the East Coast, and then I traveled all over the place. So it's been a great journey to get out of your comfort zone. And I can remember one time when I was first selling machinery, and I was in Indiana driving to a customer, and this was before GPS, and you had the AAA map, and I was lost, and I'm on the side of the highway with the map on the trunk of a Firebird, trying to find my way, and thinking, like, what did I get myself into? I had left Ohio and I'm on the side of the road with a map. Yeah, but it's been a great journey, and the fastener industry has been good to me and to my family, and all the great travel. And I love going to trade shows. I love going to factories and meeting people and seeing how things are done, and traveling around and finding all the good things in every place that you go.
You talk a lot about the beers that you sample, especially when you're in Europe. Did you ever try any of the Asian beers? What'd you think of those?
Yeah, one of my favorites was in Singapore. It was called Tiger Beer. And it's probably a favorite because it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity. And they have these areas there called boat keys, which are just little inlets off of waterways. And you go there, and there's all these little restaurants. We would have these outings of North Americans in Singapore. This was in the wire industry. We managed a trade association, and we'd get all the Americans who were there, and we'd have a night out in Singapore, and we'd have some appetizers and beer. And the Tiger Beer, they have these gals who are dressed in the colors of the beer, which I think are orange and blue. Not the beer itself, but their label is orange, and they walk around with pitchers of beer. And if you take an inch off of your glass, they'd be right there pouring more beer into your glass. But it was hot. We're outside, and it was a lager beer by the water, and so I really enjoyed Tiger Beer in Singapore. So those are good. But yeah, the best ones are in Germany though. And we'll tie it back into the job offer for Anheuser-Busch. I didn't take that job, but for a long time, I would only drink Anheuser-Busch products because they offered me a job, and it would have been a really good job. It was be manufacturing engineer for their breweries and bottling plants, and I was going to be working on designing packaging equipment and bottling lines and things like that.
That is really funny that you say that, Mike, because in my youth, we in Chicago and my friends had a pact that we would never touch an Anheuser-Busch product because, they were owners of the hated St. Louis Cardinals, and we were all diehard Cub fans.
Yeah, right.
So we would go to Wrigley and we would consume way too much Heileman's Old Style. That was our label.
Well, that's funny. But I did have an allegiance for a long time. When I was, when I was in high school, in college, I had some friends who liked Michelob Light, which we used to call Silver Bullets. And then after that job offer, I'm like, I'm only going to drink Anheuser-Busch products. But then after traveling around and things like that, I realized that I like a lot of other craft beers better than Anheuser-Busch produces. So sorry, guys. I broke my allegiance. I don't know how many years it was after that I broke my allegiance.
Well, you grew up, Mike.
Grew up, yeah. but yeah, that's funny. I like your St. Louis. I always liked the Cardinals. Growing up, I like all baseball, as you probably know if you listen to the podcast. But
well, let's turn back a second to beer in our youths. And since you are such a huge sports fan, you frequently bring it into your Fastener News Report. And this would not be a complete discussion if we didn't talk about the Indians a little bit. I bet you've got a lot of fond memories at Cleveland Municipal.
Absolutely.
What was the label of choice in your youth watching the Indians?
Well, I would say most of my Indians game, when I was a youth, I was too young. My dad took me to games, and then I started going to games with my Little League baseball buddies when we were 12 or 13.
Right. So you had 3 or 4 years till you started picking up a few blues.
Yeah. But interesting story is that we would ride on if you're from Ohio, there's a above the ground transit system called the RTA, Regional Transit, and we would take the Green Road Rapid Transit. We'd get it in Shaker Heights. My dad would drop us off, and we would take the train to downtown Cleveland to the bottom of the terminal tower, and we'd walk over to the stadium, and we'd go to baseball games. And we would negotiate with the vendors to get lower prices on hot dogs, and they would blow us off until the middle or the second half of the game when they had a whole case of stuff and they wanted to sell them. But so we did that, and then afterwards we'd go and we'd get autographs from the players. And then once we had all the Indians that we liked, we'd go to the visiting locker rooms. And back then, the players would come out of the locker room and they'd write up face to face. And some of them have a cup of beer in their hand, or you could smell the aftershave that they put on, and you were face to face with these players, and it was just a great childhood memory. But didn't drink beers at that age, and I can't think of what we would drink in the stadium. I don't know.
Well, at Wrigley, it was Old Style.
Old Style. And that's a great can, right?
Used to be.
Used to be. Yeah. I haven't had one in a while, but I'm drawing a blank. And then, now if you drink a beer in the stadium, it's like $15 or $20 or something.
Right. And try negotiating for a hot dog.
Yeah. Oh, man. They would sell foot-long hot dogs, and we knew the guys, and they'd see us and they'd laugh, and they're like, we'll come back later, and we'd buy them cheap from them. It was great. But back then, the vendor had to buy the case of hot dogs, and then he could sell them. Whatever he made, that's what he kept.
Right. That was the model.
And my dad, that was his first job. He used to sell, he was a vendor at Cleveland Municipal Stadium.
So he knew all the ins and outs.
Yep.
Well, that was a little trip down memory lane. It's been a predominantly Fastener-related conversation, Mike. I didn't know that it was going to go this way, but it's been a lot of fun. I would be remiss if I don't bring us back to fasteners for just a minute before we cut it.
Okay.
And you're a great observer of the industry. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's my main role too, is just sort of a pundit. And right now we're watching a lot of things happen. We're watching tariffs. We're watching supply chain crunches, I guess partly due to what's happening with data centers. What do you see happening in the industry? What's got your attention? Where do you see it going the next few years?
Well, I mean, in general, it's a mature industry, and it follows the path of the GDP in general, except when there's some exceptional things going on with new technologies for the parts, making the parts, or new technologies that require more parts. And so the things that are kind of coming out of the box right now are, like you mentioned, the data centers, electrification, also aerospace and defense are going up pretty strongly, maybe because the world's not as safe as it used to be, or there's some wild actors running the shows. So those are the areas that are pretty strong, that are performing above the regular GDP. And, the forecasts are pretty modest growth globally, worldwide, and, lower in the developed countries than in the underdeveloped countries. And but it seems like it's a good time to be in the industry. There's a lot of good stuff going on, even though we have the challenges, like you said, with the tariffs, supply chain, cost of energy, the interest rates being high and things like that, and all the inflation. So there is, and this has been talked about in the FDI analysis, like some things inflated from inflation. The stock market's going crazy, up and up every month. And also, we're 6 years away from COVID, but people learned the lesson of being close to the source, close to the customers, close to the factory. I just saw a commercial yesterday with Toyota was talking about all the money they've invested in the United States, and they make, I think, 13 or 14 different vehicles in the United States. They make them here now. And so the importance of being close to the source of where the product is bought and where the product is made. So I think it's, North America is in a good position, relatively speaking, to the rest of the world. And I think it's a good place to be right now. All the problems we have, they're also evident in the other developed countries, but maybe on a worse level than we have here. So I like to say sometimes we're the best of the worst, but still, still a lot of opportunity, still a lot of great, still the best country in my view on the planet. And we've got a lot of problems. We've talked about these before, like too much debt, too much government spending, people not paying attention to things, distractions, addictions to screen. And I'm one of those people, So I think it's a pretty good time to be in the North American fastener industry for sure.
Well, you've been real consistent on your position about the U.S. relative strength in the world, and I think a lot of people agree with you on that one, Mike. And nevertheless, it takes a lot of spirit and a lot of heart to hold out and to do what you do. And in this conversation, we've heard a little bit of the story behind all that. And I think a lot of people are going to be, well, they won't be surprised, but they'll be happy to hear it. And you're just a solid guy, and I sure do appreciate your contributions over the years. Looking at it in one perspective, if we keep going this way, the fully threaded relationship will extend for over half your career in the fastener industry. So how do you like that?
Yeah, that's good.
Amazing.
Like I said, I appreciate that, from our meeting back in Columbus to you asking me to do the Fastener News Report. And I got to admit, when we first started doing it, it was every 2 weeks, and it was like a lot of pressure. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do this every 2 weeks. And we changed it every month. And it was, the putting the energy into it, but it's been fruitful. It's made me grow in terms of speaking and condensing information, and so I appreciate you and Brian and Lynn, letting me be part of the team and helping me grow and become better at what I do.
Mike McNulty, Fastener Technology International. He's the editor. I think you're formally a vice president over there, right?
Yep, that's what's on the card. But mostly, I take a lot of information and boil it down into something useful.
And to us, you're the Fastener News Report guy. Sure do appreciate you being here, Mike.
Yep. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Good to be here, and look forward to the next episode.
Well, we're going to be turning the mic off and then turning it back on in a few minutes to do the FDI. So how do you like that?
This was easier than the FDI and the Fastener News Report. I didn't have to do any prep. I just showed up.
Time to get to work.
Yep.
Fully Threaded Radio is a production of Fastener's Clearinghouse.